Welcome to this week's Endurance for Everyone podcast.
The following program is for entertainment purposes only. Though the hosts of this show are certified Ironman coaches, their attempts at long-course triathlons and endurance events should not be taken as an endorsement for you to do something stupid too. You should make your own bad decisions, then podcast about it. Now, let's start the show.
Hey, this is John Harris.
And this is Rob Bozovich.
And Endurance is for Everyone, and this is the Endurance for Everyone podcast.
Hey, Karen. Glad to have you back on here. For anyone tuning in, this is Karen Clarke from our group, who we've had on with we didn't have you on before Pittsburgh. We just had you on for the Pittsburgh race recap there, right, Karen?
Yeah, for that. And then I did that kind of beginner ultra running podcast with John a little bit after that. So.
Yeah, I thought it was twice, and that's right. That's when I was absentee and out. So third time on. We might need to get you something special for that. So
I'm expecting the check in the mail tomorrow.
The royalties, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, Karen is the guinea pig here, and I was talking to her a little pre-roll. And basically what John and I are going to do is we're going to be going through and recording here and dropping each one of these as a full episode. That being said, is we're also then going to take some edits from it and some clips to piece together. Basically, I don't want to necessarily call it an Ultra 101. So we do have some targeted questions that we're going to be asking. Same questions specifically to Karen and some other guests. As such, I don't know if we're going to release that before we put all these out or at the end. John and I haven't completely thought that through, but we are going to go ahead and do kind of like when I say a regular episode, not quite sure. I think we're going to release these as a bonus content, so to say, like on maybe midweek, Wednesday, Thursdays. So, may not be a full-length show. That just depends on how much Karen feels like talking today. So, Karen, without further ado, I just want to know, because you had gave me a little bit of information, I kind of know. What have you been up to lately? Because you texted me about something here recently over this weekend, and I need details on it. So, go.
Yeah, I've been doing, actually, since I spoke to John, I've been doing a bit. I think I talked to him right before I was heading into a race that I've done a few times, the Rachel Carson Challenge here in Pittsburgh, which was really going to be my first ultra for the year. It's like a 35-mile, 7,000-foot kind of race. That did not go so well. I've had some foot issues and a few other kind of side effects for some medication I've been taking. So I ended up having to pull out of that one halfway through, which was not a pleasant experience. It happens, and we all know it happens, but just because it's the right thing to do doesn't mean you actually like it, right?
Yes. Yep.
So that was that. And then because of that, it kind of made me, and these things are always learning experiences, right? So I'm just kind of figuring out what it is I need to do now, as opposed to, what I was maybe doing a year ago. So I had some foot issues. I kind of had some strategies I wanted to try out. There just happened to be another 50K race the next weekend, I think it was.
Just happened upon one, huh?
Just happened upon one, which I also had done before as a training race.
Okay.
It's called the Hell Hath No Hurry race. So they do everything from a 10K up to a 50-mile race. Mm-hmm. And I registered for the 50K. So that ended up being my first ultra. I got the foot stuff figured out. It was a much drier day. It wasn't raining. The whole thing, was just different. So I did that. That was my first ultra for the year, and that went really, really well. So then while I was there, it's a pretty, good sort of ultra running, local trail running community here in Pittsburgh. And while I was there, the woman that was managing one of the aid stations does a charity run. And it's a very small, like a 1.2 mile trail loop that you do for a maximum of 6 hours. So you can kind of pop in and out, and the registration is based on how many hours you want to run, and everything goes to charity. So pretty cool.
All right.
I mean, I've never done a timed event, so I thought, that'll be fun. So we went and did that. That was called Annie's Race. So that was 2 weeks after that first 50K, and my goal was to do a 50K there as well, which I did in that 6 hour time. So I had those under my belt, Rob, and then I thought, well, we're heading on up in distance here. I'm heading towards a 100-mile race in October. So I'm using these really as training races, and like I say, just to kind of figure things out for the year. So 2 weeks after Annie's race was this weekend. And this was one that it's called there's a Burning River race up in Ohio. It's right near Akron, Ohio, if anyone knows the area. So it's like a 2-hour drive from Pittsburgh. It's super close. And last year they do a 100-mile race, which is part of a series of 100-mile ultras called the Midwest Grand Slam. Have you heard of that at all?
I have not, no.
Yeah, it's a series of 4 100-mile races, all here on the East Coast. And they're run, I think, between June and September. And if you run all of them, there's like a Midwest Grand Slam kind of group of people who have run all of those ultras. And Burning River, this one in Ohio, happens to be one of those. So I've been kind of slowly checking out these courses and these runs, thinking, one day maybe I'll do 400s in a year. I don't know. So last year we did
just in case, maybe someday. Okay. Well, what most people run in a year, you're going to run in 4 races. Forgetting training. Got it. Keep going.
Go home. So last year they do a 100-mile race, and then they do this really cool thing. They split the 100-mile course in half. It's actually an out and back course, the 100 miles. So the first 50 they start at 6 a.m. in the morning, and you can just run the first 50 and finish halfway.
Okay.
But then they also started this cool race, which we did this year, which is called the back half 50. So you start from the middle of the 100-mile race and you go to the end. The cool thing about it is it's run at night, so it starts at 6 p.m. And they have a pretty generous cutoff. It's like 16 hours, which for people that are not too familiar with ultras, that's pretty generous for a 50-mile race. They usually sit around 13, 14 hours usually.
Okay.
So it gives lots of time. So that kind of meant the crowd of people are not, quite so competitive. It's a little bit more fun. It's like pitch black dark. And, so that's what we did this weekend. And it was, I did it with Lloyd. He's also training for a 100-mile race in September.
The same one or a different one?
He is doing one called Woodstock, which is actually in a little town called Hell in Michigan.
Very nice.
That is in September. He did it last year. I did it the year before. He did it last year. He wants to repeat it again this year. So he's training for that. He really wanted to do this back half 50 in 13 hours. I wanted to do it as a training run. I actually have another 50-mile run in 2 weeks, so I didn't want to, totally blow my legs and, need too much recovery. So I pretty much did it with him, and he wanted 13 hours, and we finished it in 12 hours and 56 minutes. So he was pretty happy.
Nice.
And it was beautiful. Like, it was cool. The weather was great. They hadn't had very much rain, so there was no mud, and it was just a really, really fun evening. There was a full moon. It was really, really fun.
You're saying everything lined up for basically picture perfect, everything you could do.
It did. I actually wish it was the 50-mile race that I really wanted to really run in like a good time for me. But my one is next weekend in New Jersey, and I checked the forecast for 2 weeks' time, and they're saying 89 and humid. So.
Oh, you can't really. Until you're within 48 hours, it doesn't matter, Karen. Come on.
That's what I figured. But, let's face it, right? All of summer has been 89 and humid. So I think that the chances are pretty good that it might be accurate.
Yeah. No, I get that. Yeah, we don't live that far apart, and that's pretty much how it has been up here the whole time. I was corresponding with you the other day as you guys were wrapping up that race, and I was in the middle of a training run that I wasn't going so great. Wanted it to go better. Like you're saying, everything was picture perfect for it to be a good run. Just wasn't a good day for me personally. You know what I mean? We have those, and that stinks, And then, like I said, some of the days you're sitting around feeling great, and then you take a step outside and you're like, oh, this is not going to be fun. So, but you never know what you're going to get on race day, so you still got to train through it.
And the truth is, I pretty much treat all of the ultras I do now as a way of either trying out something new or I'm racing it because, I really want a decent time or I'm really aiming for a personal goal of some sort.
No, I'm going to needle you for 1 second on that, Karen. Yeah. Everybody says don't try anything new on race day. So when you say trying something new, you mean a new experience, not necessarily like, oh, I'm gonna fill in the blank something really crazy new, right?
No, I mean something really crazy new on this one. My goal over the years I've been doing this have just been to kind of simplify things, make things easier, try and kind of go with the flow a little bit more. And so this one, I decided that I wouldn't take any of my own food, that I would just eat whatever there happened to be at aid stations.
Okay.
So I took like a Larabar, and I took, I think, some shot blocks, just in case
Yeah.
I kind of had a hard time somewhere. I didn't use either of them. So at the first aid station, right, it's probably 7 o'clock at night, they had pizza. So I ate that.
Nice.
It was really good. And then at another aid station, they'd made like these quesadillas with like mashed potato and cheese. I'm like, oh, really good stuff. So yeah, I just thought I'm just going to try it. I'm going to see what happens. I've got a pretty strong stomach anyways, and you get tired of sugary food when you run these things. I think everyone who's tried to eat goo understands that.
Yep.
So yeah, it was really good. So that was my experiment this time, and it was really cool. So now that's less stuff I have to carry with me on my next ultra, because I can just eat what's at the aid station.
As long as it's pizza and mashed potatoes.
Hey, there you go. And I'm not going to carry pizza and mashed potato with me, so if they don't have it, I'm not eating it.
Yeah, that wouldn't be. I don't think they make those. I mean, you know what? They're probably out there on the internet. You search it, pizza backpack. You probably find one, but
I've heard of people carrying, like, I don't know how they do it or how they can be bothered, but I've heard of people carrying all kinds of stuff with them. So, not me.
Not yet.
So yeah. That's what I've been doing. So 2 weeks time, I have what I'm calling a real 50-mile race, which will be, something to try and race for time. And then I have a 100K that I'm doing the same day as Lloyd's 100-mile race. And then this 100-miler in October. And then the one that we are both
discussing
planning to do, Rob. Yes, that we'll discuss a bit later. So
yeah, that's farther down the list of questions. So
yeah, so we won't jump the gun here.
not yet. So you just said a few things that I think are a pretty decent segue, and that being said, we've discussed it on the show. I've discussed it with you, so it's no surprise, And I should say the genesis is, hey, I realized because of Pittsburgh maybe, and afterwards that I could get a little faster in a marathon when I shoot for a sub 4. Obviously I was shooting for a 3:45 there, but BQing is pretty much off my radar. I mean, to knock a full hour off of a marathon time, I don't foresee me being able to get that fast. Some people will say, if you're really trying hard, you're going to get there, but I don't know. I guess it's not really an a goal of mine. So that made me think about going longer. And when I say basically run walking, I feel that I can do that for a lot longer. And I feel better when I do that, slowing my pace down a little bit. And, I'm not sure that that's completely the best or valid ultra strategy. We'll cover that later. But so that's kind of what made me start thinking and kicking around this whole, ultra thing. Like I said, this is going to be one of the questions that we'll cut out, cut a clip out to go with everyone else. So, to lead off here with the questions, in a sentence or two, what got you into ultras?
Yeah, interestingly, it wasn't really the running part of it. So I ran a marathon in my 20s. I've always run on roads for fitness, but that was it. That wasn't what got me into ultras. I had gotten into adventure sports in a pretty big way. I did some sort of high altitude mountaineering, and I did some ice climbing and rock climbing. So it was adventure sport that I was really starting to love. And we were starting to do some long hikes, and I just started to see some people with like really little like day packs on, and people jogging on trails, and kind of occurred to me that you can go an awful lot further and see an awful lot more if you move faster and you carry less. So that was kind of my inroad into ultras. And then I realized they have races. So I kind of fell into it really through hiking. And I just love being out in the woods. I love seeing cool stuff. I love being off the beaten trail. So that's really what got me into it. What's kept me in it is really the competitive part of it, to be honest. Yeah.
Nice. With that, through the years, and you can answer the question one of two ways. How many ultras have you done? I mean, you talked about 2, 3 here just recently with more to come. So how many have you done, or how many years have you been doing them?
I started I'm relatively new to this. So I started, I think, towards the end of 2015. So what's that, like 3 years?
Yeah.
A little bit less,
Two
but
and a
I've
half
run,
coming up on 3 at the end of the year. Yeah.
yeah, but I've run a lot. So the first year, I did, I don't know, like three or four. I did a 50K, I did a 50 mile, and then I decided if I could do the 50 mile within a certain amount of time, I had in the back of my mind, I really wanted to do a 100-mile race. I thought it would be like a one and done kind of deal.
Mm-hmm.
So the next year, I contacted a coach, just to kind of help me moderate, how hard I went at it, because I can get pretty crazy when I get really fixated on something. But that year, with him, because you've got to build up the miles anyway, right? So the way that I like to do that is to put in a lot of training races. So that year with him, I ran 8 ultras, a whole bunch of 50Ks, a 50 mile, 100K. So that year I probably ran about 8. Last year I cut it back a little. I probably did 4 or 5. So I'm pretty new at this. I've probably done maybe a dozen, a little bit more, 100, and a whole bunch of 50Ks, and then some stuff in between.
Nice. So now that question, different vein here, I should say, and I just want to ask it. Do you think that is that to me sounds like the most natural progression? Maybe is the best way to say that. And go for I'm going to say marathon, then 50K, then 50 mile, then 100K, 100 mile, because they go up sequentially in distance, and that's pretty much what you did. Is that what made the most sense to you as well on that, or? That's why you did it, or just because you were building up, so you just kept looking for that next one?
Right from the very beginning, I just wanted to do a 100-mile race. And I did this when I first started road running too. I was like 22. I had, honestly, I'm not exaggerating here, never really run a step in my life, never done a 5K, didn't do anything at school. I had in my head I wanted to run a marathon, and I just started training and I ran the marathon. This is what ultras were like for me. I just heard about 100-mile races before I'd even ever done a 50K, and I just really wanted to do one. So to train for a 100-mile race, like I say, you've got to kind of do some pretty long training runs. And I honestly couldn't get my head around organizing my own run that would be like 8 hours or something. Like I just couldn't figure that out. So
Yeah.
the easiest, and also I think the safest way to do those long training runs is to do a race where you've got aid, you've got people around you, as well as just it being a whole lot more interesting, because it's going to be a pretty cool course instead of just figuring out some little loop, near where you live. So, but I would say that a lot of people do step up. I wouldn't say you have to.
Okay. Good to know. I mean, that being said, is I'm just getting into running, or not running in, maybe dipping into the ultra thing. And so that being said, though, is when I was getting into running, I'd gone from nothing to bins full of gear. Yeah, you think you need everything, and I understand that each race or season, meaning like, hey, winter's going to be different than summer. It can be different, but like let me focus on the Fire in the Mountain race, which is looking to be similar to the statistics of the race that Karen, you just talked about. You said it was your one you just did was 34 miles, 7,000 feet. This one's going to be what, 32, 34 miles with about 6,000 feet of elevation. What gear do you think is essential? Assuming we have clothing, shoes, hats, like what else, like a GPS, I mean, I'm figuring a watch, I mean, for time, but also to have accurate distance. Do you use a hydration vest or a belt, trekking poles? I mean, some people I see have them, some don't. Like, what would you put in there, and what else wouldn't you?
This is a big question for me, because I think that it's very much a personal preference thing. What one person thinks is essential, another person will think is a waste of time. I also think it has a lot to do with experience, and how much a lot of people get a lot of comfort from having certain pieces of gear. Somebody else, and I sway a little bit more towards this end, the less gear I have, the less gear I have to worry about. And so the less I'm going to stress if my trekking pole breaks or, something else happens. So I tend to go towards lighter gear. So maybe I'll answer it just from my personal perspective, because it really hasn't changed all that much over the years I've been doing this. So I don't use trekking poles. I actually think they slow me down, and they just, if something's really steep, I'm spending enough time figuring out where to put my feet. I don't need to think about also where to put 2 poles. So,
Okay.
I just prefer not to have them. Lloyd, on the other hand, loves them. So again, this is a very personal thing. I, for many years, just used handheld water bottles. I have a vest that I use if I'm on long training runs and I just need to carry more water. There's a limit to how much you can carry just holding 2 water bottles. So having a vest for training, I think, is incredibly useful, and I would call it essential for long runs, where you're not going to be able to refill water and you don't want to just do a loop by your house. For races, I think a vest can be really good if you want to power through aid stations. You don't want to stop at every aid station to fill up a water bottle. If you have a vest with a bladder in it, you can skip some aid stations, or you can just grab a snack and just fly on through them. And also if you're doing a race where, what you've got to remember with ultras is it's not just the miles that you're covering and how much water you might drink in 3 miles on the road. It's how much time that might take you. So, when you're looking at different races, you've got to really think about how long you're likely to spend before you can refill water. And that's how I would decide whether to carry a handheld or a hydration vest. It really just depends on how long do I have to go unsupported and how much stuff do I need to carry. And I much prefer always just to have a handheld if I can. It's just a personal thing. I do wear a GPS watch because I really, especially if I am doing a race that is really technical or really hilly, and like I say, there's going to be a decent gap between aid stations, I like to know roughly with my watch where I am. I also love to post it on Strava and Garmin and kind of look at my own stats and get an idea of, vert and how far I climbed and how long it took me. I like that stuff. And I like to have, part of the reason I love the sport is I love the strategy. I love figuring that stuff out. So,
Right.
having that data after a race is really, really useful.
Nice.
That's all I take. Yeah.
Nice. Simple and to the point there with that. And then excellent. Next, your questions then, and then like I'd said it and kind of alluded to it earlier, I'll just drop it back in. And that's, I've never done an ultra. You have, and I know you just said it's figuring it out and what race strategy, it's going to vary per course, per season, per everything. But what I'm thinking, it's simple as this, potentially walk or power hike up the hills, go as fast as safely possible downhill, and run the flats. Does that sound is that a race strategy?
That's definitely the strategy that I used for all of my early ultras, because aside from anything else, Rob, sometimes that's all that's practical. If
Right.
something has really steep hills, you cannot run up them. I mean, you would know yourself with zero experience that makes no sense, and you would end up hiking up them. You might be pissed off about it, but that's what you would end up doing. And you would see everybody around you, unless you're a front runner. And even then, they're hiking really steep hills too. You'll see everybody around you. And my rule of thumb would be to anyone who's new, if you're the only one trying to run up the hill, you might want to think about walking.
Nice.
So you can take a lot of cues from the people around you. So definitely, though, I would say walk up the hills. And that's still the strategy I use with Lloyd, even anything that is mildly a hill, because the ones that'll get you are not the really steep ones that are obvious hikes. It's the very gradual long climbs where you can expend an awful lot of energy and not get any further than if you power hiked. So when I think walk, I'm not talking about a stroll. I'm talking about walking with purpose, practice it, when you're training, and be able to walk at a really good pace. So yeah, I would say definitely walk or hike hills. Down, yeah, if you can run them and your quads are good, and again, you've practiced running downhill in training, which is something a lot of people don't do, and they wonder why their legs get trashed on race day. If you've practiced running down hills and they're not too technical and you feel like you can do it safely, then I would run down them. If you can't, then I would walk, and definitely try and run all the flats. Yeah.
Nice.
Because what you can't do is, and I hear people do this with ultras, they look at the amount of time they've got. Let's say it's a 50K and the race says you can take 9 hours. They divide 9 hours by, however much, 32 or 33 miles, and they figure out they only need to average X minutes per mile. It just doesn't work out that way. Because
Right.
first of all, you can't average that. Whatever pace is comfortable for you, you're probably going to be slower at the end than the beginning. You can't average that going up. You may or may not be able to going down, and you've got to have some kind of cushion. You're going to stop at aid stations. You're going to need to pee behind a tree, like stuff happens. So,
Yeah.
So don't be deceived by that. If you're used to marathon running and you see an ultra and you think, oh, I could walk the whole thing. Sometimes you can,
Well, and
but
that's where I
it's
was
not. Yeah.
being, I'm going to use air quotes here, being humble because I already know that I already know that there's a lot I don't know. And that's why I said that when looking at John, I forget what it is, like an 18-minute pace. I'm like, well, hey, y'all, that's, I can go out and walk 14. Like when you said it, walk with purpose. If I'm out on a flat road, I can walk a 14-minute pace. But if they're giving you an 18-minute pace, that is because they know there's a lot that's going to be going into it, and that's where you said it. And I guess it does come down a little different as well. Looking at the Fire on the Mountains website, it basically even says like, hey, even though you're going out and coming back, we're pretty sure it's a lot harder coming back.
Yeah.
So you can't, if you hit the middle point halfway, you ain't gonna make it.
Yeah, I think there are lots of things that can help you if you're new figure out a good strategy. One of them is I totally agree with that basic principle. Walk up, try and run down if you can, but don't assume you're going to be able to run down. Jog on the flats, but keep it at a comfortable pace. Like I said to Lloyd this last weekend, run a little slower than you can and walk a little faster than you think you can.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of evens out and you're not totally trashing anything. So you can use that rule of thumb. The other ways are, like you say, look at the website. There is a ton of information. Race directors will try and tell you everything they can to help you figure out whether, first of all, it's the race for you, and second of all, how you might approach it. And the third way of figuring it out is to look at past results. And they're even more useful if they've got splits, at different points on the course. Look and see, like if you're normally a mid-pack runner, look at the mid-pack people, and just see how long it took them. If there are splits, see how long it took them on different parts of the course. If they suddenly slowed down 5 miles in, you can guarantee it was either really technical or really hilly.
Yeah.
And then look at the weather, look at what's happened 2 weeks before on trails, because that's going to determine whether they're dry or muddy. Look at the course, look at stuff like that. And all of those things together will not only give you more confidence, they'll give you a really realistic idea of how you should approach it.
Got it. This, I should have just asked it earlier while it was in the flow of our conversation, and I didn't. I realized now I see I have it here. I had figured I was going to jump into this race because it's, using air quotes here, just longer than a marathon. Like I said, it goes, marathon 50K, right? So 50K and roughly 31 plus miles. And I don't even know if this is a true 50K. It might be a little longer. I'm pretty sure based on the trail they're using.
They're usually longer.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's how every one of them is. But so, like, I guess the question really it is a little ramble, but not. And it's, does that seem achievable? Because it is a month after. It's a month after. Do you think that's achievable for me?
Honestly, can I say a couple of things about this? Let me just
Sure.
tell you, I do have a little bit of a pet peeve, and I don't know, this might frustrate some people, but I take ultra running as a serious competitive sport. That's what it's become for me. So in the same way as you wouldn't say to somebody who loves swimming, oh, you should just go do a triathlon. Like, what's the middle distance? I don't even know how they go, but
That's to go to sprint, yeah.
Yeah, so let's say a sprint. You wouldn't just say to someone who loves swimming, oh, go jump in, you'll be fine, because you take triathlon as a serious sport. So I try not to get defensive about it, but I get a little bit rattled when I hear people say, oh, I run and there's this ultra and it's got this huge long, time frame, so I can just go do it without having to, do any extra preparation. That kind of frustrates me a little bit, because you may be able to, that could well be true, but I kind of like to take it a little more seriously than that. And I think most people that toe the line of an ultra have put in a decent amount of work to get there, and they're taking it pretty seriously at that point.
Right. Now, I guess let me redefine, and because I never ever, and I think I've said it a bunch of times, and I always say it in person, I never try to diminish anyone's accomplishments. It's never just a 5K or just a 10K. That being said, is I'm going into it more. My thought was, and maybe I'll rephrase this question as well for others, and that is, I'm going into it with the idea that I'm going through not just a easy training plan, but a 6-day a week Hansen plan, and I'm gonna have 5 months of training or 6 months of training into it, and that being said, is altering my Hansen plan to be harder. The idea being, and I was going to, not that this past weekend didn't work out, but this one coming up. So, Friday 8, Saturday 10, Sunday 10 was this last week. This next one coming up is going to be 8, 10, 15, and I'm going to make either one of those, either the 10 or the 15, into a trail run dedicated, so that way I'm not just going to tack on the last 3 weeks before the race as my dedicated ultra. I'm going to be doing that now for 8, 9 weeks.
Yeah. And knowing you and knowing where you live, knowing the sorts of trails you have access to, and also just from what I've heard you talk about what you've done this year, I have no doubt that you could do it. I really don't, because I think that you absolutely have got the cardiovascular fitness to be on your feet for maybe 8 hours, even though a marathon might only take you 4. I think cardiovascularly, you'll be fine. I think what would get you is you need to look at the race you want to do and look at, like we've said before, not just the overall elevation profile, but get some idea of, are these short, steep hills? Are these long, slow hills? Are there a lot of downhills? And if you can get that as part of your training plan so that your muscles and your legs and your joints and everything else are used to doing it, not only will you do better in the race, but it'll be a much more pleasant experience than if you went from training for a flat marathon and then tried to do the Fire on the Mountain Ultra. It's not to say you couldn't do it, but I don't know that it will be a lot of fun.
Got it.
Yeah. So I think if you can just modify the training a little bit, exactly like you're talking about doing, Rob, like get comfortable on some trails, so that you can move reasonably easily. Look at the profile, make sure you practice, if it's hilly, practice the downs as well as the ups. And absolutely, I think you could.
Excellent. I like the vote of confidence.
I would say that I think anybody can run an ultra, just like I think anybody could do a triathlon, provided you do the training.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I get the triathlon portion. I haven't done an ultra yet. Need to do it in order to find out. So, you've already dropped, and I could go back through and pick out. You've given some great nuggets of wisdom already for advice. I got 2 advice questions here, and that being said, the first one is, what's one piece of advice you would give to me or any new ultra runner on their first attempt, like pre-race, right now, leading into it, or towing the line 1 second before they say start?
I would say relax, run your own race. Don't worry too much about what the people around you are doing. The thing that has helped me absolutely the most, and I still do this now, even if I'm planning on racing a race, with a few exceptions, but start at the back. Go to the back of the pack, do your own thing. You can always pass people. What you don't want to do at the beginning of an ultra is a little bit like in a marathon. You don't want to go in the first corral if you're planning on doing a 6-hour marathon, right? Mm-hmm. And so for your first ultra, unless you've trained on a similar course and you're planning on like going flat out and you're really confident in your ability, so you want to be like further up the field, then I would say go for it. But if you're just doing your very first one, you're feeling it out, you want to have a good day, I would say start at the back, run your own race, and just have some fun, man. Like, enjoy it, Soak it in, run a little bit below what you think you can do, run within yourself, and just have a good race, and start out strong, start out enjoying it, and see where it takes you.
Now, I'm going to interject a story here, and not so long, and that is, I had done a race with my brother-in-law, and it was I don't know which one. It was down in Pittsburgh, Steeler maybe. I don't know which year as well. And they had done it on the Riverwalk. I don't know if they've done it before or since, but the year we did it, you kind of ran out and then turned around and came back in. And one of the things we did was, like you said, went last, literally backed up. We were the last 2 people that started that race. And that, we did do then obviously a lot of dodge and bob and weave and passing people. And, I don't think that this race is going to, Fire on the Mountain is going to quite have that kind of turnout, people-wise. So starting at the back might be 30 seconds versus 15 minutes, difference.
Yeah.
But that being said, it was, when I say completely chip timed, so our time didn't start until we started, and like I don't think that's going to be as much of an issue here. Once again, 30 seconds over what's potentially going to be a day-long race, I think it's worth it, and I think that's a great piece of advice. Like you said, because then at that point you're doing your own thing.
Right. And most ultras, I would say, other than the Annie's race I talked about, the 1.5 mile loop, that's a charity race, they're pretty much all chip timed. Like, most trail races are. So, if you really are wanting to get a very accurate time, it's not going to start till you cross the line anyway. And what I would say is it's much more fun passing people than it is being passed by people.
Well, I know that from my first 5K, and this goes back to 2005, I want to say. And then I didn't run a cup for a few years after that. But, I was training and thought I was doing well, and I knew nothing about pacing. When I say I went out and dropped the hammer, I'm out running with like the lead group. I'm not paying any attention. Like I usually was about an 8.5, 9 minute miler, and that first mile was like a 6:50 something, and I'm like, wow. And then mile 2, somebody just handed me a piano, and I didn't know if I was going to finish that race, and that was the first race. Everybody does it at some point, and I learned my lesson early on.
And what I say to people too, and Lloyd and I have this discussion all the time, you've got, an ultra, a 50K is, unless it's a road one and it's really quick. I think the fastest I've ever done a 50K is 5 hours, and that was on road. So on trails, they're going to take you probably 6, 7, 8 hours. Mm-hmm. You can't really go out too slow. Like, let's say you go out and 4 hours in. Hey, if you've got the energy and you've got 15 miles to go, then, foot to the ground, go for it, and finish super strong. And You've still got plenty of time to put all that energy into finishing fast. So even if you sell yourself a little short, over the first 5-10 miles, you've got a ton of time to make that up and just kind of go for it at the end. But I would guarantee you will not get to 20 miles thinking you went out too slow.
The piece of advice that everyone has heard and says to every new triathlete: you aren't going to win the race in the swim, but you sure can lose it.
And people can get kind of anxious in trail races too, because there's a lot of what we call single track, and maybe I should let people know what that is in case they don't know. It's literally what it sounds like. It's a trail that's so narrow that one person's on it and they have to get off the trail for you to be able to go past it. So people get really anxious about that, and they worry about getting stuck behind other people, and then they won't be able to run, and they'll be behind their times and their splits and whatever it might be. Trust me, it thins out really fast. And even if you have to walk a little bit behind someone until you can politely, ask them if you can pass on the left, you are not going to lose a lot of time. And it's just not worth the anxiety of worrying about it. It's just how trail running is. You don't have the whole trail to yourself. You can't always pass everyone you see. You just kind of have to hang with that a little bit and not get too upset by it.
I say this jokingly, and I hope my wife will listen to this episode. And unlike, it sounds funny, in our house, it just seems to be, no matter what, it's her or me, whenever one of us is trying to go somewhere, the other one is always right there in the way. It doesn't matter, whole house. I'm sitting here thinking we're going to be out, and these races take place in what, like thousands of acres, and that one person's right there. If you're, I get what you're saying, because, and this is off topic, but on the same thing, my college roommate went on to grad school in New York, and whenever we were visiting, he said, it doesn't matter where you are. At some point, somebody's going to want to be standing exactly where you are. And that's how New York City is. And I find it funny with the woods, too. It's just, hey, I get it's a race, and I do, like you say, it's single track, and this is the safest trail. If I'm that impatient, I can go around. Or, like you said, I can't go out too fast. Slow down, take it easy, wait till it widens up, because that's just extra, I don't want to say bonus time. That's extra that you're going to get back later. That's energy you're not expending. You're going to expend so much energy through the race. Taking it easy occasionally is not a bad thing.
And if you find yourself getting uptight about it, use it for something else. Use it to take something to eat. Use it to get a drink. Use it to check the time you've taken against the strategy you had. Do a bit of math in your head.
Water the foliage.
Yep. So you could do that too. But then someone else might go past you, and then you're stuck behind two people. So
that's true.
I also just want to say here, just to keep this real, I don't want to sound like I'm some sort of super chill trail runner, because I am absolutely a type A person and really competitive. But what I would say from experience is I've driven myself crazy and ruined what could have been some fun races by getting really uptight about what's going on around me when there's really not a lot I can do about it other than being an absolute jerk and pushing past people and just acting like, some obnoxious road runner. So, I've learned the hard way that it's just a much better experience if you can just take a deep breath, like I say, find some other way to occupy your time, talk to the person, say hi. Usually if you chat with them for a couple of minutes, they'll actually say, oh, hey, do you want to get past?
Yeah.
And most trail runners don't actually want people right on their heel. And I don't either. Like if I'm running along and I hear somebody coming up behind me, I want them to go because I don't want to feel like someone's behind pushing me along and I have to go faster than I want to go.
Right.
On the other side of that, also just be aware that you might think you're making a lot of noise and the person in front should know you're there. I'm amazed at how often I'm on a trail and I have no idea someone's right behind me until they say something and I almost jump out of my skin.
Yeah.
So I'm always really conscious before I'm right behind someone on single track, I'll say something. I'll say hi, I'll say how you're going, I'll say something just so they know I'm there. 9 times out of 10, if you caught up to them, they're going slower than you are, and they'll ask if you want to pass, and you can say hello, say whatever, and just go on past. So just try and chill.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got our pre-race piece of advice and a whole great long conversation there. And you actually dropped a bunch more knowledge nuggets, I'll say. But what's one piece of advice that you're going to give that same newbie during the race? Number one piece of advice.
Yeah, probably exactly what I said to Lloyd over and over on this one we just did. They're long races. You got plenty of time. Run a little slower than you think you can. If you're walking, walk a little faster than you think you can, and just be steady. Don't get stressed. Don't worry about splits. This is not a marathon. This is the trail will at the end of the day, the trail will dictate the pace you go to a large extent. So yeah, run a little slower than you think you can. Run within yourself. Walk a little faster. You get to the last third of the race. If you held yourself or went short at the beginning, you got tons of time. Go for it. Go all out in the last bit if you've got extra energy at that point.
Nice. I don't know. I haven't spoken to him yet, but one piece that Sean had given me via text, and it was for Pittsburgh, and I don't want to misquote it. I hope he brings up as a piece as his piece of advice, and that was I think it was like run the first half smart, run the second half brave. And I thought something like that was just so cool and profound to think like, yeah, go out and do what you're gonna do, and then really just lay it on out there once just you're gonna make it, just go for it. So
yeah, and again, I'm not suggesting that you have to go out and wander at a 25-minute walking pace. That's not what I'm saying at all.
Yeah.
I'm just saying start out at a pace that feels like you're pushing it a little bit, then dial it back 5%.
Yep.
And just sit just within so that you're comfortable.
Got it. And then I think we've kind of answered it several times, and people can intuit the answer to this without saying it. But you available early November, and you want to come down and do this Fire in the Mountain?
Hey, I already told you, man. If you want someone to pace you through it, I am more than happy to do it. They also, for Fire in the Mountain, they also have a 2-person relay option, which I actually checked out because John was kind of interested in it but wasn't sure, given the cutoffs and the hills, and he's training for a road marathon, not for ultras, and so he was a bit reticent. So I actually contacted the race director and asked if they still had a 2-person relay. And they do. So I absolutely would love to do the whole 50K. Lloyd wants to come up and either do a relay with someone or do the whole 50K himself. So, yeah, absolutely. And I just love that time of year. And I'll be looking for something else in November. That'll be about a month after that 100-miler, assuming, I get there and do that. So it's good timing. It'll be nice and cool. It looks like a pretty awesome, low-key race. I think it will be fun.
Excellent. And you're going to be going crazy because you've already accomplished the BHAG, the big hairy audacious goal. So now it's it's just something to jump in and keep yourself busy, right?
It kind of is, but it's I very rarely approach races like that, to be really honest with you. And that's why I've been using Lloyd a little bit as my goal to kind of help him, because it gets me out of this whole competitive side of me. Because I want to run everything to the best of my ability at that time. That's just how I am. It's very rare that I would just go into something without really any idea of how I want to do. At the very least, I would have looked at last year's results and figured out what might be possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you're the same. I think that, you've got to be driven, you've got to be motivated by something to train for these endurance events and then to actually go and stick it out on the day, because it's uncomfortable. It's not all going to be happy, cheery, fun in the woods. So there's got to be some reason or some why that you can answer for yourself. And it could be curiosity. It could be I've never done one of these and I want to try it out. But I'm going to guess that most of the people listening to this who have done a triathlon or are thinking about it, or an ultra or a marathon or a 5K, there's something in you that's wanting, you want to push yourself that little bit and do the best you can. And, I think that there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that I definitely go into every race with that goal.
Yeah. Awesome.
And even this one with Lloyd just this weekend, I was trying to kind of run within myself for him, but I would see somebody up ahead, because you could see headlamps, right? It's the middle of the night.
Yeah.
So I would see someone and I would know for me to suddenly be seeing them, I must be going a little faster than them. I'm like, Lloyd, if we just pick it up here, we can go past that person. So... And then once you get past them, you've got to stay in front of them, right? You don't want to pass them and then have them run right past you 5 minutes later. So
And then if I shared the story, I apologize, but that's where, when I was out doing nationals triathlon a couple years ago, they're very big on their rules. One of the rules is basically, if you're being passed, here's a cut down version a little bit. The rule is, if you're being passed, somebody gets next to you, once their front wheel crosses in front of yours, they've quote passed you. Now you, as the one being passed, have the duty to let them complete the pass, and you have to drop back out of the draft zone. Triathlons aren't draft legal. So, and also that guy passing, once you initiate a pass, basically, because you're not supposed to get right on somebody's wheel. That's part of it, because you're saving energy with them blocking the wind. You have so many seconds to get out around, complete your pass, and get back in front. So that's that whole, the duty passes from one to the other, okay? And that being said, it's actually a weird little thing. It's part of a race strategy where some of these people, as soon as their wheel would cross, they let off pedaling, because they know you have to slow, basically meaning they don't have to be faster. They can make you slower, because if I don't let them complete their pass and get 3 bike lengths in front of me, I can get a penalty. Okay, that's a long digression to say.
And so people actually deliberately do that to
yes. There was a point, and you can watch, if you went back, and there was a point in my data where you can see I went from like a 17 mile per hour average to a 6 mile per hour average, because I actually had to hit my brakes, almost come to a stop in order to get out of the draft zone, because there was a official on a motorcycle right there that would have given me a penalty. And the penalties are like 2 minutes, which are big. Okay. It's weird. It's like chess. But I say all that because they very clearly had said, hey, listen, basically don't be vengeful. If you get passed by somebody, let them complete the pass. Let them get out ahead of you. If they're passing you, it's because they're faster than you, And if you're going to pass somebody, make sure it's because, it's not, I've been riding about the same pace and now I want to surge out. Basically, once again, don't be vengeful. Don't make the pass just to screw with this person, because if you pass them and then they immediately have to pass you again, you're not going fast enough to be in front of the person. They're basically saying, know your role and know your pace and just stick with it, and it's pretty, and that's kind of what you're saying here. When you see the people in the distance, it's because you are running faster than them. You know what I mean? You be smart, you get them, you can catch them, you can pass them, because, you might be 10 seconds a mile faster or a minute, depending on the terrain and what's happening. So,
and in trail races, you quite often will just naturally leapfrog with people, because some people go faster up hills, some people go faster downhill, some people run the flats, some people don't. So it's kind of like a standard joke. Like if you pass someone, I'll often say to them, I'll see you at the top of the next hill, or I'll see you at the bottom of the next hill. And sometimes you'll get it wrong. Like you'll pass somebody and you won't know that there's a big hill coming up And so suddenly you'll run past them, and then there'll be a hill and you'll walk. And I just apologize to people. Like if I do that, if I called it wrong, I'm just like, oh man, I'm really sorry. I should have just stayed behind you. It's like, you're clearly faster up here than I am. So, I just kind of own it when it happens. But yeah, I don't just run past them. This has happened to me. People have run past me. They're so happy to have gotten past, and then they slow to what their regular pace was, and then you're stuck behind them. Like it's really frustrating. So yeah, don't do that.
Got it. Well, hey, Karen, we're wrapping up. We're about almost 50 minutes here. I think it's a good point to break off. Didn't know if there's anything else you wanted to interject or anything you wanted to share with the group, the community. You had already given us early on there what you have upcoming and so forth. Didn't know if there's any last minute word of advice or anything you wanted to say.
Not really. I mean, again, I would just say, like we started this off, I'm still pretty new to this too, and it's definitely a sport that you can grow into. So, pick some races that you think really tweak your interest, instead of worrying about whether or not you should be jumping right into a 50 mile or right into whatever it might be. If it sparks your interest, then it kind of sets that light off where you're motivated to actually train and go for it. Then I would say go for it no matter what it is. Even if it seems like it might be too big a jump, just give yourself enough time, get the training in, and go out and do it.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I appreciate having you back on for the third time. Hopefully all goes well with your training through the summer and mine as well. And we will end up having you on a fourth I say hopefully it's a fourth or a fifth time, maybe a little pre-race and then maybe a during post-race wrap-up, how did it all go scenario there. So
I think we can record a post-fire on the mountain over a beer somewhere, right? And just record a little bit of a race recap.
I don't know what FCC regulations are, but I'll have John research in between now and then.
Of course, we'll be drinking soda,
Root beer. So
hey, this one that we just did on the weekend, this is another funny little story. Like usually, ultras start super early in the morning and you finish late at night, and a lot of them have a beer sponsor and they always have a beer tent at the end. Mm-hmm. They had one for this race, even though we finished at 7 a.m. in the morning, and Lloyd was drinking beer at 7 a.m. in the morning. So there you go. Welcome to the world of trail ultras.
Whole new set of rules.
Yeah.
And social norms. So awesome. Hey, Karen, once again, thank you so much for coming on. Everyone go check her out in the group. And, once again, just very, very much appreciate all of the advice you've given so far, and I know you'll continue to give.
Yeah, and I'll keep posting stuff, in the Facebook group, Good, Bad, and Ugly, and, try and give people a realistic picture of what it actually looks like.
Cool. Hey, thanks so much.
All right.
Everyone, thanks for listening, and, that's all I got. I don't know how to end it because I don't know where we're going to go with it. So appreciate having me on, Karen.
Thanks for listening to the Endurance for Everyone podcast. If you have comments or questions for the show, send an email to teamE4E at enduranceforeveryone.com. And remember, swim calm, bike strong, and run steady.